Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This story was posted by a throwaway account in the relationship advice subreddit. The post is titled, "I set up 2 of my friends. I found out today he has been catfishing me as his partner on her phone to check on our friendship. I have a childhood friend, Emily, whom I've known since we were 5. We originally met because our respective fathers were both German and living in the UK after marrying British women. They became friends and we were basically raised as siblings. Nothing remotely romantic has ever happened between us. It's accurate to say I treat her like I do my other sisters. People sometimes struggle to believe that nothing has happened between us, but is it so insane for someone with 3 sisters to treat a childhood friend as a 4th? We stopped being friends briefly when she got married far too young to her boss. He ended up being incredibly abusive, controlling her life at every level, and over the 3 years they were together, he basically isolated her from all friends and family. We reconciled when she divorced him. Around this time, I attended university and met my now wife early on. We were assigned to the same floor in halls. We've been together for 17 years now, and she's become really close to Emily over the years. Also at university, I met a guy named George in my course. We were part of the same friendship group, but didn't stay in touch until we coincidentally ended up working together a good 10 years after graduation. I introduced him to Emily and they started a relationship. A year or so later, they moved in together. Emily was happy. He was happy. On the face of things, he seemed fine with my friendship with Emily and never said anything. Over the past few weeks, I started getting texts from her, sometimes late at night, that were just off. I became suspicious when she used a common British shortening of my full name rather than the traditional German version that our respective fathers would always use. When some overtly flirty messages occurred, almost outright sexting, I immediately shut it down, 100% sure it wasn't her. I called him out and asked if it was indeed George using her phone, bluntly asking why he was trying to sext with me as his girlfriend. He never responded, but after explaining the situation to my wife, she went over to Emily's with my phone to see what was going on. I wasn't there for this, but she showed Emily our entire text history and what he had done. George came home and they confronted him. He first outright denied it and had the audacity to accuse Emily of sexting me while trying to hide his cheating from my wife by saying he did it. Emily just left with my wife to come stay with us after this because there was no reasoning with him. The morning after, he called and begged her to come home. He was crying and threw himself at her feet, claiming he did it out of jealousy. He highlighted that she had a habit of deleting our conversations, which drove him mad. He was always jealous of our relationship and found it hard to see me with her. After seeing her say things like how she loved me, not being able to read our texts drove him to basically go fishing to establish our relationship. The sexting was an attempt to bluntly see if it was something we, or more specifically I, would engage in. At this point, Emily asked for mine and my wife's opinion on this whole situation. I called bullshit on this being a mistake, something he was driven to by jealousy. He violated her privacy by going through her phone and risked our friendship by masquerading as her. He risked my marriage by trying to bait me into sexting a friend and jeopardized Emily's and my wife's friendship by making it look like Emily was sexting me. The entire situation was a clusterfuck. I didn't outright say she should leave him, but I highlighted how dishonest this whole thing was. She eventually went back home and I didn't hear anything for a few days. However, Emily eventually revealed to my wife that she had functionally forgiven him. From their conversation, my wife worked out what had happened. He had basically flipped the script on me by playing into her fears from her marriage. He described me as another controlling male trying to dictate who she could have a relationship with. He encouraged her to make her own decision, but she had to ignore me because I supposedly didn't have her best interests at heart. He painted me as controlling her like her ex did. My wife quietly pointed out that he was in fact being like her ex, not me. He was driving a wedge between her and her family. At this point, Emily just gave up. She said she couldn't win and couldn't decide between the man she loves and her brother, so she thought, forget it. Let's pretend it never happened. We haven't really spoken since then. Apparently, part of forgetting this ever happened also involves giving in to his worries about our friendship. Every time I try to bring up what he did, I've either been ignored or told to stay out of it. Honestly, this pisses me off. He's gotten exactly what he wanted. He stopped us from talking. I know I can't force her to break up with him, but it feels like a catch-22. 22. I can't push her to make a decision about what he did while he's got her convinced that I'm the one controlling her. I rarely see George at work, and he's rightly kept his distance from me. I was tempted to bring my sisters into this clusterfuck, tell them what happened, and see if they can talk some sense into Emily, but that feels somewhat manipulative as well. So, any advice here? Should I let sleeping dogs lie, or try to get her to deal with what he did rather than sweeping it under the rug? User Dan Z Relationship said, well, it's obvious that Emily has an emotionally abusive boyfriend. Accusing her of cheating and isolating her from her friends are classic signs of emotional abuse. As you pointed out, the sad thing is that she has accepted the situation and is doing exactly what he wanted, which is to break the two of you apart. Let's face it, Emily only had two choices: break up with her boyfriend or go along with what he wants for the sake of the relationship. She's chosen the relationship, at least for now, until her boyfriend does something even more abusive to her. I understand that you feel sad about losing your childhood friend, but you have to accept this for the time being. Don't try to interfere in their relationship, and don't involve your sisters. The only thing you can hope for is that Emily will eventually see what George is really like and decide to leave him, but that may take some time. Just try to hang in there. A deleted user said, the only thing you can do is nothing. The more you push, the more she will dig her heels in. She is a grown woman and is responsible for herself. Just be there for her when she needs support. I promise you, this isn't the first time he has treated her poorly, and it won't be the last. User Whiskey Tango said, any move you make from here will likely be seen as manipulation. George will spin it that way. She had the sense to leave the last jerk she was with and reconciled with you then. It looks like history is going to repeat itself here. I wouldn't initiate a discussion with your sisters about this, but since your wife and sisters are friends with Emily, this will likely come up in various conversations between them. It's probable that one or more of your sisters will bring this up with your wife or you, and that's your opportunity to express that you've backed off to let this situation play out. You can also mention that you're open to reconciliation down the road. Word will get back to Emily through them at some point. When Emily eventually comes to you, it sounds like it's time for a heart-to-heart about the type of men she falls for. You should make a point about how the men she chooses isolate her from you and your friendship, so she can be more aware of this pattern in the future. Update. So I followed the general advice of just leaving the entire situation alone. I agree that any interference from me or my family would be manipulative and controlling, albeit well-meaning. I haven't really spoken to Emily since slightly before Christmas, but her mother contacted me a little after New Year to ask if I knew what was going on with her. Emily's cousin back in Germany had reached out to her mother saying that Emily had shown up on her doorstep after apparently breaking up with George. According to her mother, Emily had come back to our hometown for the holidays. She brought George with her, and at some point, they ran into her ex-husband at the pub. For context, we grew up in a tiny village in the middle of nowhere. There's literally nothing in our village except a pub, a post office, and a small supermarket. Her ex still lives where we grew up. This information was relayed to me via Emily's mother. Apparently, at some point, George approached Emily's ex-husband and asked for some advice. George is familiar with the story of their relationship and knows how controlling he was and why they divorced. Somewhat to her ex-husband's credit, he apparently refused to answer any questions and quietly approached Emily's mother to relay what George had asked. Now, this is according to him, and George denies it, but he said that George asked him how to handle me in terms of my friendship with Emily. I have no idea what Emily's ex-husband's motivation was here. They've been divorced for a decade now, and he hasn't contacted her during that time, so I'm inclined to believe it wasn't an attempt to interfere with her life. Maybe it was manipulation. Perhaps in the decade since their divorce, he's become a better man, who knows. We're all inclined to believe that this is what was asked because how else would her ex-husband know there was an issue with me recently? He isn't in contact with anyone who would know about the recent issues. To be honest, the ex never had an issue with me. He saw me as a child and constantly called me kiddo, asking how school was. It would be a very specific shot in the dark on his part to assume George had an issue with me without George saying so himself. Emily's mother told her what George had tried to do and pointed out that her boyfriend was now trying to emulate her ex-husband's behavior. She encouraged Emily to confront him about this and also about what happened over the last month rather than ignoring it. Nobody was privy to the discussion they had, but he left sometime after it to return to their shared home while she stayed with her mother, saying they had broken up. She remained with her mother until the day after when she, without any warning, left for Germany. The cousin she's staying with assures us that she's relatively fine. She's just overwhelmed and embarrassed that she let this happen again. She couldn't handle being in a place where she might run into either ex, so staying with her mother was off the table. She just ran somewhere far but safe. I still haven't spoken to Emily. I've sent her a message offering my condolences and reassurance that she will always have a home here in the UK. I've decided to continue giving her space while making it clear that I am there for her. She hasn't responded, but I assume this is just out of awkwardness over what happened and how technically George was once my friend. He hasn't spoken to me either, and I haven't seen him at work at all, so yeah, it's not a happy ending per se. It shouldn't have taken her abusive ex getting involved for there to be a resolution, but as people predicted, George was being abusive and would repeat that behavior. I suppose it was relatively painless that he showed his true colors so emphatically without much further abuse. This could have dragged on indefinitely. Thanks for the advice. Staying out of it didn't make things any easier for her, but it probably avoided making them worse. Final post. Given that this whole situation has now been entirely sorted in the 3 months since it happened, I thought I'd provide a full resolution. Emily came back to the UK just before the country went into lockdown and moved in with us. Albeit reluctantly, we grabbed some beers and played Divinity 2 while we hashed out exactly what had gone down from her perspective. I apologized for going behind her back and speaking to her mother about it all. Situations like this are never helped by information being relayed through other people. I asked if she wanted to go through everything from start to finish. Basically, she buried her head in the sand the day she found out he had been trying to sex me as her. It was just too much for her. She felt she couldn't win. She either lost the man she loved or lost her brother. I assured her she'd never lose me, but she revealed that she low-key hated the fact that she had let herself be taken advantage of like this twice and couldn't face me after not listening to my advice. She also mentioned that breaking up with him would inevitably land her on my doorstep for support, which made her feel bad as well. This went deeper, and she opened up about her insecurities, how she regretted never going to university, instead marrying her abusive ex-husband, and how she felt like an accessory to other people's happiness. She saw me and my wife and felt so small by comparison. She did love George, but leaving him would leave her with practically nothing again, and she couldn't handle that. We talked about this a lot. I revealed that I was aware my support of her could be a problem. I felt like I had made their relationship awkward by being so involved in her life. It might have been hard for George to feel like her boyfriend while I was there picking up her tabs, doing the DIY, and basically acting like a father coddling his child. I asked if my financial support of her tied into this feeling of inadequacy as if I was dragging her along for my ride, and she said it was indeed a problem. She felt trapped when the relationship ended because she had no independence or true control. While I would never use my position to control her, she still felt like she would be living by someone else's good graces. She expressed a need to stand on her own 2 feet and be her own woman rather than relying on a man. That way, her decisions would be truly hers rather than made under some level of duress. In the same way a child wants independence from their parents, she feels that she finally needs independence from me. So we came up with a game plan. Now, the lockdown has obviously made this harder. She is still living with me and my wife currently, but the plan is for her to go back into education. She was capable of attending university, but decided not to due to her marriage. My financial security was really born from an inheritance I received after my father died. This allowed me not to worry about rent during my extended time in education and early career. I've decided to pay it forward and put her in a similar situation by letting her use my flat, which is currently unoccupied because it's only been rented to students due to its proximity to 2 universities. Yes, this is me financially supporting her, but in a strictly limited way. No more covering errant bills, paying for holidays, or footing the bill when we socialize. She will not pay rent, but she will cover all bills for the flat, and she will move out the moment she finds work. She wasn't thrilled about the idea of me owning her home, but I called it my last act as that guy in her life. The pseudo-brother, father, sugar daddy, best friend. After this, we'll just be independent siblings and best friends. She will be moving soon. We need her room after all, since my wife is now 5 months pregnant. As for George, he swears up and down that he never asked the ex-husband to handle me. He claims he asked how to be fine with me. It wasn't seeking advice on how to deal with me, it was seeking advice on how to be fine with me the way her ex-husband was. That could be true, who knows? Ultimately, it's irrelevant. However, we recently found out that George moved a girlfriend into the house he and Emily used to share. And here's the kicker, it's a longtime friend. Emily is fairly certain he never cheated on her, but she laughed out loud when she found out he was romantically living with a longtime friend just 3 months after their breakup. The dude's insecurity was likely born from his own feelings for a friend. He was getting close with a girl he was friends with, so he projected that onto me and Emily. She's broken up and moved on. We're aiming to have a healthier relationship by helping her gain some independence. George is shacked up with a female friend and was projecting his insecurities the whole time. Edit. Just to clarify, because this paints a picture I don't intend. I don't pay all of Emily's bills or for her stuff and holidays. She doesn't want independence from me specifically. She wants independence full stop. She went from her parents to her now ex-husband and then spent about a decade living paycheck to paycheck before meeting George and living largely off his money. She has no real qualifications and her current line of work has limited prospects. The things I do for her fall into two categories, and the lack of clarity between the one-offs and the consistent support made it look like I pay for her entire world. Firstly, there are the trivial things I do consistently that I'm stopping as a massive overreaction to George. Logically, it's fine for a brother and his wife to do these things for their sister, but they weirdly make her uncomfortable, and they obviously made her ex uncomfortable as well. For example, I've done the odd bit of DIY, and I pay for her drinks when we socialize. I'm stopping all that trivial support largely at her request to ease her discomfort about being subsidized by me. It's a pride thing. This might also help with any jealous boyfriends who might wrongly assume that because I pay for her cinema ticket along with my wife, we're secretly Mormon. The second category includes the big one-off things like paying a bill or buying plane tickets. Things I did in a crisis out of extreme generosity. She wants to be able to feel safe during situations like COVID without needing to live with me. She wants to be able to break up with a guy and be okay alone rather than crashing here. She wants to be able to mess up a meter reading on her electricity and weather the silly bill that comes without me paying it. I'm not going to stop doing these things entirely. An emergency is an emergency, and we won't let her come to any harm. Instead, we're going to try to ensure she doesn't need me for these things by focusing on her education and hopefully helping her secure a better job. So yeah, I don't pay for her entire life. I just muddled some big things I've done in emergencies with some trivial brotherly support. User Delamella said, "That's why he was so intimidated by you, because he had strong feelings for a longtime friend and assumed you did too. It's similar to how cheaters are often convinced that their partner is cheating, constantly calling them out and trying to catch them in the act." User Always an Antelope said, "I would feel uncomfortable if a longtime friend of the opposite sex who didn't look gay was hanging around my partner all the time. But if anything, it brought out his true character. So you being there helped a lot. It tested him and he failed. She knows he's the one when he asks politely for her to stop seeing you or when he ghosts you. Until then, don't break off anything." This next post was made in the relationship subreddit by a user named Pixel Pusher. The post is titled, "Am I the Crazy One?" So I'm a 33-year-old woman dating a 40-year-old man for the past 2 months, and he has done some things that I find disrespectful and demanding. When I confront him about it, he tells me I don't know how to act right in a relationship. Even his co-workers have pointed out how disrespectfully he speaks to and about me. One of the first things that raised alarm bells was when we were talking on FaceTime while he was at work. I asked him specifically if he was alone, to which he replied yes. He then asked me to expose myself, which I did, and as soon as I did, he turned around and his co-worker was behind him. I immediately hung up and he called me back asking why I was upset. His explanation was that he walks while talking on the phone and that this was unintentional. Another red flag occurred after we made love when he wanted to take a picture of the sheets. He explicitly said I would not be in the photos, so I moved to the head of the bed to stay out of frame. Later that day, he sent me the photos he took and I was clearly visible in every shot. From day one, he asked me to clean his house for him, to which I replied no. He offered to pay, but I explained that I'm dating him, not his maid. He left his house for months and it was absolutely disgusting. He even paid his mother to come clean his house for him. Anything he chooses not to do, he pays someone else to handle. I find this ridiculous. We had a huge fight because of these incidents and his controlling manner. He said that he understood how this was a major breach of trust and that he didn't realize this behavior would be upsetting. Thinking that he had seen the light, I went back. However, every time I'm asked to do something I've never done before and don't get it right immediately, he calls me an idiot or a silly bum, which has recently evolved into little jerk. He treats me like I'm constantly incompetent. He puts down my interests and questions what I'm doing anytime I'm engaged in something he doesn't like watching a video on my phone, texting friends, or not going directly to sleep when I'm told. He likes to snuggle, which feels to me like being restrained by a cement mixer while staring at the ceiling in the dark and unable to sleep. Then he gives me grief for not sleeping. When we were eating corn on the cob, he asked me to get him napkins, which is completely reasonable. I brought them to the table, but he didn't put his cob down and insisted that I wipe his face. This man is 40. He also asked me to fetch him a chocolate bar from his kitchen and questioned if I was actually blonde because I couldn't find it. Last night, while eating pizza, he left the box in the living room and demanded that I go back into the house several hours later to put his pizza in the fridge. This morning, he woke me at 6 a.m. to get him Advil because his back hurt. I did, and then I was wide awake. So I started working and got ready for the day while he passed right back out again. When he woke several hours later, he was upset that I didn't come back to bed and that I had showered. When I explained that once I'm up, and that he should have gotten it himself since he can fall asleep on a dime, he got upset and said, "I guess I'm used to my girlfriends taking care of me. I'd do it for you, and I can't believe how upset you get when I make the simplest requests." He constantly talks about how his girlfriend will need to adapt to his lifestyle. He is also well endowed and purposely injures me to let me know he was there. Last night, we went through some vacation pictures that he took a few weeks back, and I was alarmed by the number of photos he has taken of me without my knowledge. There were topless photos and pictures of me at the beach in a bikini, which he knows I'm self-conscious about. Sorry for the super long post. I already know the answer, but every time I confront him about anything, he says that the problem is me. Am I crazy, or should relationships be about coexisting rather than conforming to someone else's standards? I've been living independently for 15 years and am educated. I feel like he belittles me to mask his lack of intelligence. This last post was made in the same subreddit by a user named Axel Barillas. The post is titled, "My girlfriend rejected my proposal because it didn't meet her expectations." For context, my girlfriend and I have been together for 6 years, and over Thanksgiving weekend, I took her on a week-long trip to Hawaii with the intention of proposing to her. I even asked her parents for their blessing and showed them the ring a couple of days before we left for the trip. We have talked about marriage before and agreed that we want to marry each other, so the idea is nothing new and actually a frequent topic. The issue is that she wanted a grand wedding proposal similar to the ones you might see on TikTok or Instagram. Big "marry me" letters on the beach, rose petals on the ground, lights, mariachi, etc. I was absolutely on board with doing that for her if it made her happy, but I believed that was something to be planned at a beach back home since I wouldn't have the resources to organize it for a trip to somewhere we'd never been, especially because we booked everything as a last-minute vacation just 5 days prior. Ironically, after she sent me videos of people vacationing in Hawaii. I thought this would be a great opportunity, so I planned to propose to her on the day we arrived. I carried the ring in my pocket all day, waiting for a good moment to ask her. However, we had some completely unnecessary arguments, and I decided to postpone because I didn't want to propose after a bitter day. On the second day there, we had booked a reservation to go parasailing. Not wanting to risk losing the ring, I left it back at the hotel. We didn't get back until around 5 p.m., and by this time, we started getting ready to go out into the city as it was already starting to get dark. She had mentioned before that she wanted a sunset proposal, and knowing that I couldn't organize any of the other things she had in mind for a proposal, the sunset was the only thing I had left. Unfortunately, I missed my chance on that. We still went out for dinner and drinks afterward. When we returned to the hotel, she was tired. I let her rest for a bit, and around 10:30 p.m., I convinced her to go on a night walk with me at the beach. This was when I planned to propose. When we got to the beach, the city was still very much awake, and the lights of the buildings and streets combined with the bright moon illuminated the ocean beautifully. We stood there hugging and kissing, both knowing it was a beautiful and intimate moment. I started telling her how much I love her and how I want to be with her my entire life. As I began to get on one knee and reached into my pocket for the ring, she stopped me. "I hope you're not about to propose to me right now. This isn't what I expected." My heart dropped. I got back up and stood speechless before starting to walk back to the hotel. I was in no mood to talk about it and told her we should discuss it tomorrow. The next day we talked about it and she insisted that I do it again, but this time the right way during sunset. I told her I couldn't do that because she had already rejected me. She argued that she didn't reject me, she simply said it wasn't how she would have wanted it to happen. We spent the next 4 days in Hawaii in a very tense state, but had to deal with it until we got back home. We lived together, but for the first night after returning, she went to sleep at her parents' house. Now that she's back, I don't want to be home with her there. What can be the outcome of this situation? I obviously didn't want this to happen during our vacation, but I can't see it any other way. Is this a valid reason for me not wanting to be with her anymore? I also don't think it's right for me to redo the proposal. My girlfriend turned down my proposal during our vacation in Hawaii because it didn't fit her idea of a grand proposal, yet she insists on me redoing it how she wants it. We had the breakup talk. My girlfriend has always been a bit self-centered. I've known that and have been able to put up with it. About 4 months ago, she started having therapy sessions. I don't know how long they last, what days they are, or what they talk about, but I do know that she has become an entirely different person. She's been more compassionate and cooperative with me, the things I've always wished for her to be more, and this caused me to be fully ready to commit to a life with her, hoping this new mentality is permanent. Anyway, she talked to her therapist and told me that she asked her one question: do you like surprises? She told her, of course, that she does. She explained that as her boyfriend, I most likely know that and was trying to do something heartfelt and unscripted. No mariachi, glamorous dress, or big letters, just the two of us. She further told her that if she truly felt in her heart that she wanted to live a life with me, all of the other superficial stuff shouldn't matter. She's apologizing to me, telling me she really regrets what she did, and assuring me she would have said yes anyway. My biggest regret is that I'll never really know what she would have said, though in my gut, I'm not 100% sure she would have said yes. Her first reaction during that moment was completely dismissive of me and disrespectful, something that I feel like I can't take anymore. I'm standing my ground, telling her I've swallowed my pride way too many times in the past, and we should go through with it. I'll be sleeping on the couch tonight. She'll be packing her things tomorrow and going to live with her parents. User Maddie Lyon said, I'd say both of you are in the wrong, and you should think carefully about whether you are right for each other, especially since you're so young. Yes, it's bad that she wanted an over-the-top proposal just for Instagram, but you didn't listen to any of her other wishes. I think it's fine that you weren't able to make it huge and Instagram-worthy, but you also didn't consider her desire for a sunset proposal and some sort of romance like flowers to go with it. Neither of those requests are unreasonable, yet you chose to do none of that and dragged her back out when she was tired after a long day. I would be upset with you as well, especially since you've talked about what she wants several times. This makes it seem like you either didn't listen to her or didn't want to put in the effort to plan ahead. User Bangity Bang said, while I understand it must hurt to be rejected, I'm not sure why you chose to propose at this time. It sounds like she made her wishes clear and you compromised on or disregarded all of them. Ideally, you'd only experience one proposal in your life, so why not do it right? You knew what she wanted, didn't follow through, and then got confused when she wasn't happy. Personally, I think that even after 6 years, you're too young to get married. This may just be you both discovering some fundamental differences in priorities.